I'm Angel, and welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you're a subscriber. Today, we're going to talk about what I've been thinking about. So let's get to it. The other day I was on Facebook, and a friend of mine had posted one of those little cut and paste, I grew up in Dayton sort of things. I thought in this instance, with me still being relatively newish to Dayton, that I would go ahead and read the entire post because I could learn something. What has lingered with me over the past few days are these two sentences. Eating out at a restaurant was a huge deal that only happened for very special occasions. McDonald's was a real treat. I think the reason this has lingered with me is because restaurant workers across the country, and Dayton is no exception, are really struggling right now. I talked a little bit about this in one of my unemployment blogs, but in case you haven't been following that series, the short and sweet of it is that many of them don't qualify for unemployment because they don't meet the minimum weekly earning threshold set by the federal government. The post made me wonder why, if these things were meant to be treats in the 50s, we don't pay these workers enough today to qualify for unemployment. I remember when Seattle raised their minimum wage, there was panic. Anti-minimum wage activists were saying that increasing the minimum wage will only be passed on to the customer, and in the restaurant industry that meant that the price of eating out would become cost prohibitive for many, and restaurants would be closed and people would lose their jobs. What this really says to me is, what will the market bear? How much are people willing to pay to eat out? Since my friend specifically mentioned McDonald's, I thought I would start with the now iconic franchise and see where that led me. It turns out that for a long time, but also in the 1950s, a hamburger at McDonald's was 15 cents. And according to my research, that was about half of what it cost at a typical restaurant. That gives us an idea of food cost. To keep things simple, during my research, I maintained the plain hamburger, a small French fry, and a small fountain drink for all of my comparisons throughout time, because based on the pictures that I was able to find of the 15-cent hamburger, it looked like it was the plain hamburger that they still have today. Now, I needed to know how much it was going to cost to eat at home. Across the country in 1950, a pound of ground beef was 51 cents. Accounting for inflation, that comes to $5.47 today. In our grocery market, retail average ground beef in the United States in 2020 is $4.27. Overall, I found that the price of food has dropped. A 5-pound sack of flour cost roughly 48 cents. That comes to $5.09 today. But if we went to the grocery store and bought a 5-pound bag of flour, we could expect to pay about $2.15. That's a significant price decrease. In 1950s America, a family of 4 could expect to eat out at McDonald's and pay about $1.49, approximately $14.38. By 1961, there was an ad to feed a family of 5 for $2.25. That's $19.47. Today, a family of 5 eating the same meal could pay about $17.40. The price has decreased $2.07. Now, I want to talk about average family income, because the amount of money that a family brings in determines the amount of discretionary money they have to spend on things like eating out. In 1950, the federal minimum wage was 75 cents, and close to the end of the decade, that went up to $1. In today's currency, that meant that it went from about $8.05 an hour to $8.59 an hour. Thanks to the good people over at the Department of Commerce, I was able to determine that the average American household income in 1950 was $3,300. That's the equivalent of $35,420. By today's standards, that's just above the federal poverty line for a family of 4, which explains why eating out happened rarely and McDonald's was such a treat. Although the federal government measurement of US poverty wasn't developed until the early 1960s, we can take that matrix and apply it looking backwards. And if we do so, we see that 22% of people in America lived in poverty in 1950. That's 40 million people. Moving forward, we see the declining prices of food and the increasing in income. The official poverty rate in 2018 was 11.8%, about 38.1 million people. And that's an improvement over the nearly 40 million people in 1950, but it's still 38.1 million people. Because of inflation, the current federal minimum wage of $7.25 is about 25% lower today than it was in 1968. The current federal minimum wage is $7.25. Luckily, many states, Ohio among them, has raised the state minimum wage above the federal minimum wage. In Ohio, the minimum wage is $8.70. Today, the median household income is about $63,179, and the mean household income is $90,021. The cost of eating in home is lower now than in the 1950s. More of us have even more disposable income, and we spend a lot more of it on food others prepare for us. From 2016 through 2018, about 45% of the money spent on food was spent on eating out. Yet we argue that the cost of paying workers a better wage would make eating out cost prohibitive for many Americans, which would reduce foot traffic into restaurants, making it impossible for them to remain open. Thus, people would lose their jobs. The reality is that restaurants fail all the time, even now with low wages. Some estimates place it at about 60% failure rate in the first year, and every year is somebody's first year. And that's because no one has an obligation to visit an establishment and spend their money there. The menu price argument just does not pan out. McDonald's prices vary widely around the world. The classic Big Mac in America averages $3.57. In Switzerland, it's roughly $6.57. My own husband paid $66 for a large pizza in Norway. I think the problem isn't that we can't pay workers more, it's that we're afraid that doing so would impact us. We don't want to cut back on the frequency of which we dine out with our family and friends. We are quick to point out other people's entitlement behavior, but when it comes to our own entitlements, we've earned it, but we can't talk about that. So we deflect. We don't want to make the argument about wages or about us and our selfishness. So we make the argument about protecting jobs. But the pay is still awful. Why are we protecting low-paying jobs? According to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, 434,000 people make the prevailing federal minimum wage. 1.3 million earn below the federal minimum wage. Together, these 1.7 million workers with wages at or below the federal minimum wage make up 2.1% of the hourly paid workers, down admittedly from 2.3% of all hourly wage earners in 2017. To justify the low pay to ourselves, we say, well, teenagers work these jobs. That's age discrimination. Most laws are written to protect older workers, but young people are severely poorly paid. Employers can pay someone under the age of 20 $4.25 an hour for the first 90 consecutive days of work, as long as it doesn't displace other people already employed. And there are still 400,000 people aged 25 and above who earn $7.25 an hour. And when we see an older person working these jobs, we say it's a character flaw. They didn't work hard enough, or they didn't get good enough skills to get better jobs. According to the AARP, an estimated 244,000 hourly workers are 55 and older. In 1933, FDR said, "No business which depends for its existence on paying less than a living wage to its workers has any right to continue in this country." By business, I mean the whole of commerce, as well as the whole of industry. By workers, I mean all workers, the white-collar class, as well as the man in overalls. And by living wage, I mean more than a bare subsistence level. I mean the wage of a decent living. Seattle has been a hotbed of studies since they implemented their $15 minimum wage. And some of these studies are flawed, admittedly. But the bottom line is, Seattle hasn't imploded. The world hasn't fallen off of its axis, and we're all still here. Those companies that deserve to survive will, either because we save our pennies and eat there once a year for special occasions, or because they've streamlined their process and made it so fast and easy that it's cheap for us to just fly through the drive-thru without thinking about what we're paying. Either way, their employees deserve to be able to earn enough money so that in a pandemic, they can qualify for unemployment. So that's what I've been thinking about. What have you been thinking about? Leave a comment down below, let me know. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.